All right, this is day one of economics. Let's move me out of the way here a little bit. Before you get started, you want to make sure that you have obtained the note sheet that is found on the haiku. Make sure that you do see the one that says note sheet for Intro to Econ, and be aware that you will need to get the vocab terms and sentences homework, which will be due at the end of your first week in economics, okay? So make sure you have those sheets and that you have them ready to rock and roll, so as we go through this, you can fill out any definitions that need to be done, or add any pictures or little things to help you understand the information. Now we should start by congratulating you because you have survived the government portion of American Institution. And now it's into economics. And to start economics and to start understanding what economics means and what the study of economics revolves around, we set up a scenario in class, kind of a simulation. And obviously if you're watching this video, you probably were not there for that introduction. So imagine this. Your economics teacher, me, brought in a few bags of popcorn. And I say that each bag contains the popcorn. So I'm going to call rows up to the front to get some popcorn. Once a row is done with the popcorn, the next will go on and go on and go on until we're out of time. Each person can take as much or as little popcorn as they like. But there's only 5 minutes for the entire class to get their popcorn. So row 1 gets up and gets their popcorn. Row 2 gets their popcorn as well. But when row 3 gets up to get the popcorn, there's nothing left in the bag. The other bags the teacher brought are actually just empty or filled with paper. Only the students that have the popcorn get the popcorn. This makes the students who did not get the popcorn really mad. So I asked them, what is the problem here? What is the problem in this scenario? And obviously most of the students will at first say, the problem is you didn't bring enough. But as I explained, look, the students could take as much or as little as they wanted. So even if I brought more, I could not promise that there would be enough for everybody, because students could take as much as they wanted or as little as they wanted. But why does the problem exist? Why does this problem exist of popcorn? And the students are quick to say it's because everybody's greedy. It's because we're all self-centered and we're greedy. But that's only a disguise for a much bigger economic problem. And that problem is the problem of scarcity. Okay, scarcity. That's going to be your go-to answer here for the economics unit, is this idea of scarcity. The idea that nothing in our world that we interact with is unlimited. Nothing is unlimited. It's scarce. Now on your note sheets, it wants you to record, what is the definition of economics? And you're going to have to be able to recall this from memory. So make sure you understand what it means when you're writing it down. Okay? We use economics to study this issue of scarcity and how it forces people into making decisions. Because if everything were unlimited, you'd never really have to make a decision over anything because you could just do it later. Or there'd be enough for everybody to go around. So here you can see the definition, the textbook definition of economics is really twofold. First part is the study of how an individual or society uses its scarce resources to meet unlimited needs and wants. The idea of scarcity is that everybody has to choose. How will we use our time? How will we use our money or our energy? Because none of those things are unlimited. The second portion of it, and you'll see this sometimes, it says economics is the study of how a society produces, distributes, and consumes goods and services. Both of these are going to be important for understanding economics and the major ideas in it. Now, both of those definitions are important to understand. But if you can grasp the idea that economics is the study or the science of choice, how and why people and societies make choices, you're going to be good to go. Okay, but you have to understand that these choices we make are because of scarcity. Okay, and this is a basic economic problem. You have to understand that scarcity is always involved. And it arises because people, you and I, have unlimited wants, but our resources are limited. Okay, so it creates this idea of scarcity. Okay, and scarcity forces people in society into answering three essential questions. What are we going to make? What are we going to produce? How are we going to produce that? And for whom are we going to produce it? So what are we going to make? How are we going to make it? And who gets it? If everything was unlimited, it wouldn't matter. But since there is limits on everything, we have to determine how are we going to use our time, our resources, our energy. What are we going to produce? How are we going to produce it? And who are we going to produce it for? Now, when we're talking about what to produce, we really are looking at, or have to understand, the difference between a need and a want. Okay, needs and wants. Now, you'll hear lots of people, especially little kids, and they'll be in a store going past the candy aisle, and they'll tell their parents, I need this, I need this. And what we have to understand is they don't need the candy. That doesn't classify as a need in economics. That's a want, and we have to be able to distinguish between needs and wants. So needs are anything that we need to survive. What do human beings need to survive? And a want are things that we desire but don't necessarily need for survival. Now I want you to take a second, pause the video, and do a little research here. What are needs of human beings versus what are wants of human beings? And see if you can figure a couple out before you come back and continue the slideshow. Now, after taking a second to think about some of the things we would classify as needs, let's take a peek at the 5 that we're going to have to know for sure. And actually, I kind of split it into 6, and I'll explain that. The most obvious, though, are always air, water, and food. Human beings cannot survive without air, water, or food. All right, just a fact of life. You're going to have those 3 things to make it any length of time at all. So air, water, and food, all considered needs, obvious needs. The other ones, though, shelter, and I actually split shelter into kind of 2 different parts, with shelter and then clothing. And a lot of people will argue this point, but if you ever watch, Survivor shows or Naked and Afraid, the first concern is always shelter. How are they going to shelter themselves from the climate that they're in? Human beings are very adaptable, but we're not well suited to being unprotected in the elements. And the last one is one that definitely is a category I kind of say is on the fence. Because for some individuals, this is absolutely necessary, and for others, they might be able to get away without it. And that is the idea of medicine. I have relatives that are diabetic, and they need their insulin pump, and they need that going all the time. And if they don't have that, they can get really sick and die. Yet there's other people who can go, it seems like, their whole life and never even go to the doctor and be just fine. But if you do require some sort of medication, that becomes an absolute need. So generally speaking, there's 5 or 6 categories, depending on how you want to argue it, for needs. And everything else, every other thing, would fit into a want. Okay, so an easy way to tell is, can a human being survive without it? And if the answer is no, they cannot, then it's a need. If they can survive without it, then it's a want. Okay, so we've spent some time talking about needs and wants, and the reason that ties into what to produce is, does an individual or a society spend their limited resources producing things that we need to sustain human life, or things that we want? Entertainment things like an Xbox or a movie. Okay, and that plays into what are the goals of a society or the goals of an individual. But you all need certain things to produce these needs or wants. Regardless of what they are, you need these things. And we call these things in economics factors of production. And there are 3 that we're going to hold you responsible for. Okay, and the 3 are land, labor, and capital. Land, labor, and capital. These are the 3 factors of productions that go into the production of goods and services that will eventually become needs, things to fill needs, or things to satisfy wants. Okay? Now these 3 categories of land, labor, and capital, the factors of production, are things we're going to have to be able to pull right from memory. Not only recognized on a multiple choice exam, because they're a huge component of what we look at when we're studying economics as far as what do societies produce. Well, it depends on what factors of production they have as a means to create these things. So when we're talking land, it's not just real estate. It's also all the resources that come from the real estate, like mined minerals, native plants and animals, and other things that relate to the actual physical land. When we're talking labor, it's not just the muscles of humans, it's also the minds of humans. So if you have great ideas or are using your body to produce, well, then that becomes labor. And the last thing is capital. A lot of people think of capital as money, and that's one thing, because capital is any human creation that is used to help produce wealth and create other things. Like a car that's being used as a taxi, well, that's capital for the taxi service. Or a ladder that's being used by a painter. The labor uses that capital to perform a task, to create wealth, and to fulfill the roles of either satisfying those needs or those wants. So all in all, today, if you're able to go through and define economics, discuss the issue of scarcity and how it relates to economics, talk about needs versus wants, as well as providing some examples of both, and then discussing the factors of production, land, labor, and capital, and being able to identify and explain, how those things are important in economics, you should be good to go. So review this as you need, fill out your note sheet, and make sure you are caught up for the next day of economics.